Hello! This video is the second in a series sharing my campaign to meet the requirements for the NMRA Achievement Program's certificate for Master Builder Prototype Model, and to provide some helpful tips for those wishing to do the same. I have prepared information videos for other certificates which you can also find on this YouTube channel. In part 1, I reviewed the specific requirements for the Prototype Model certificate, and you can find that video on this channel as well. In this installment, I will review my choice of prototype scene for my project and how I intend to meet the various requirements. The prototype scene for this category can be a portion of your layout if you're modeling a specific prototype, or it can be a separate diorama or module, as I have chosen. In my case, my layout is still several years away from the scenery stage, and I wanted my prototype scene to be portable for display at shows. As there is no minimum size requirement, the overall size will be determined by what can fit into my vehicle. When selecting a prototype scene for this category, it is important to keep the requirements for the certificate in mind so that you know you will be able to meet all of the specific requirements. So let's review them briefly here. The scene must contain at least 6 models of prototype equipment or structures. 2 of the models must be scratch built and the others super detailed. Now, in part 1 of this series, I reviewed the NMRA's definitions for scratch built and super detailed, so you can consult the video for that. At least 4 different types of models must be represented: rolling stock, railroad structure, caboose or passenger car, and motive power. From this, we can deduce that we need to select a scene which has at least one structure present, and note that it must be a railroad structure. For example, a bridge, trestle, station, water tank, and so on. We also need to be able to realistically pose a train in the scene, either a passenger train with motive power or a freighter work train with motive power and a caboose. The motive power and the rolling stock need to be subjects which you can model faithfully, and they should be trains which would have been seen in your prototype scene during the era that you are modeling. The applicant must provide a written description, photographs, documented evidence, and maps of the prototype scene. This requires selection of a prototype scene for which you can provide this, for which you can source photographs, plans, maps, and so on to support your modeling. You might also consider accessibility for field research when selecting a scene. Some locations are more difficult to access than others. Not related to the scene selection, but do remember that you will need to provide color photographs and a written description of the model build. So with all this in mind, I will share with you my selection for a prototype scene and how it will allow me to meet the various requirements for this category. My layout depicts the British Columbia Railway's Dawson Creek subdivision in 1977. However, this location is too far away from home for occasional field research, so I elected to focus on a scene much closer to home, but on the same railway and in the same era, so that I could use existing motive power and rolling stock models. I selected a scene at the intersection of Marine Drive and 31st Street in the municipality of West Vancouver, British Columbia. At this location, the railway crosses 31st Street on a concrete viaduct and then crosses Marine Drive on a steel plate girder bridge dating back to 1914. I selected this location for ease of field research, as it is a short drive from my home and is easily accessible during the day. I also have plans for the 2 bridges, and I was able to obtain plans for the topography and street layout in this area from the district of West Vancouver. Now, if you're choosing to model an earlier era, then you will have to provide evidence of what the scene looked like at that time. This type of research can often be quite enjoyable. So to give you an example, I will show you how the scene that I am modeling has changed over the years and where I've zeroed in for my era. The Pacific Great Eastern Railway built its North Shore subdivision from North Vancouver to Whitecliff in 1913 and 1914. It was intended to be part of a line extending north to Squamish and beyond to Prince George, but the section along Howe Sound was too challenging to build at the time. Service to Dunderave commenced in January 1st, 1914, and it was extended to Whitecliff in July of that year. Here we see the Marine Drive overpass under construction. We're looking east along Marine Drive. The north approach trestle is on the left, and formwork for the North Pier is under construction. And in a similar view a little later, the crossing Marine Drive comprised a skewed through plate girder bridge with pile trestle approach spans, and 31st Street was also bridged with trestle work. The North Shore subdivision remained in operation until 1928, and at that time service was suspended and the tracks were taken up. This photograph shows the completed Marine Drive overpass, and again we're looking east along Marine Drive. In 1956, the tracks along Howe Sound were finally laid, and the line across the North Shore was relaid and restored to service. At this time, the original pile trestle work was replaced with frame trestle approaches for the Marine Drive span and frame trestle work for the 31st Street overpass. In this view, from August of 1974, we see the mid-train power in a northbound train crossing over Marine Drive. And we can see the steel girder bridge, and we can see one of the new frame trestle approaches there, dating from 1956. And then a year after that photograph was taken, the British Columbia Railway replaced all the wood trestles in West Vancouver with prefabricated concrete spans. This was done during 1975. This included the approach spans for the Marine Drive overpass and the entirety of the 31st Street overpass. The steel girder bridge remained in service, and along with the 1975 concrete bridge work, continues in service with CN today. Here we see a southbound freight train crossing Marine Drive. We can clearly see the new concrete approach span. The 31st Street overpass can just be made out at extreme left. These images are offered as an example of how a scene can change over the years, and it has changed since this photograph. Today this area is quite grown up, the trees are taller, there's a lot more vegetation, and the bridge is actually quite closed in and harder to see now. But this arrangement seen here is what I will need to recreate in miniature on my diorama. This image also provides a record of the street markings, traffic lights, sidewalks, and other details evident at this time, and of course those can also change with the passage of time. So my diorama will focus on the railroad right-of-way and the streets. I will limit the area to be modeled to avoid having to research and model nearby residences, which are either no longer there or which have been significantly altered. My model will be a shaped diorama measuring approximately 5.5 feet in length and 21 inches in width. This will be long enough to pose the required motive power and rolling stock, but it will be small enough to fit into my car for transport to shows. As mentioned, I will be modeling the area as it appeared in 1977 to match the era of my layout and equipment. This means that I will be replicating the concrete bridge work from 1975, as well as the original 1914 steel girder bridge. The two railway bridges are going to meet the requirement for inclusion of a railroad structure. There's also the bus shelter seen below the lead engine. That is still there today, and I've already measured and photographed it for modeling. The terrain, vegetation, roads, and vehicles will have to appear as they did in 1977. I mentioned the need for ease of research and availability of evidence such as photographs, plans, and so on. The Marine Drive overpass remains in service today, and it is pretty much unchanged from its appearance after the changes in 1975. I can therefore take my own photographs for modeling reference, and I have the plans for the steel girder span, concrete approach spans, abutments, and piers. Here you see a 1995 plan and section drawing prepared by BC Rail for the steel girder bridge, and it actually lists all of the various measurements needed, and also a recent photograph that I took of the span. And again, you can see how much things have grown up since 1977. This is an example of the type of evidence you will need to support your model. The 31st Street overpass also remains in service today, and it's unchanged from its appearance after the changes in 1975. Here is a general arrangement drawing of the overpass and a recent photograph of mine. I should be able to scratch build these two bridges and thus satisfy the structure requirement as well as the requirement for two scratch built models. It is also necessary to include a train in the scene. In part one of this series, I discussed an unwritten expectation of having a matching prototype and model photograph for your scene. So I'm hoping to match the 1977 photograph I showed earlier, and I can get fairly close with these three locomotive models seen here. These will meet the requirement for inclusion of motive power, and they will qualify as super detailed. They are seen here posed on a different overpass on my layout. And the rolling stock pictured here will count towards the required 6 models, and it will meet the requirement for rolling stock and caboose. The 3 freight cars are all scratch built, and they've already earned merit awards for the Master Builder Cars certificate, and the caboose has qualified as super detailed for that same certificate. These cars are from the era I'm modeling, and they could very easily have been seen passing through West Vancouver en route to the yard in North Vancouver. So hopefully this illustrates for you how the selection of my scene will meet the various requirements for this category and might aid you in selecting a scene for you to do the same. In part 3, I will share the start of construction on my diorama. I should also mention that this project, in addition to earning the Prototype Model certificate, is intended as a learning opportunity for scenery, roads, trees, etc. prior to undertaking such work on my layout. So I will be sharing my experiences in these areas as I progress and learn. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned for further installments as I work towards this particular certificate. Bye for now.